Alright, this is another Prager University video of which they intellectually, educationally destroy the feminist agenda and all their gynocentrism and misandrist bullshit. So for the most part, I'm gonna just let it, play through and not interrupt too much, because this lady, I don't really have to interject much. She just speaks the straight up truth, nothing more, nothing less. And for those outside the echo chamber of victim mentality and all the propaganda of the feminist bullshit and all that other gynocentristic bullshit, this is more or less, common sense type stuff, for the intellectually endowed. So, nonetheless, here you go.
Women in the United States and in Western Europe are the freest and most liberated in human history. In many ways, they are not merely doing as well as men, they are doing better. Women's emancipation is one of the glories of Western civilization and one of the great chapters in the history of freedom. So why then are those in the women's movement, such as the leaders and members of activist groups like the National Organization for Women, the professors in women's studies departments at our colleges, and many women in the media, why are they still so dissatisfied? These feminists hardly acknowledge women's progress. Yes, they concede that some advances have been made, but the fact that most women reject their activist brand of feminism and think of themselves as free is, for this crowd, proof of just how entrenched patriarchy and inequality truly are. Women are so oppressed, they don't even know it. Year after year, these activists make claims about women in violence, women in depression, women in eating disorders, women in workplace injustice, to support their views. Over the years, I have looked carefully at many of these claims, and what I have found is that much of the supporting evidence, mostly victim statistics, is misleading and often flat out wrong. Consider the issue of the so-called gender wage gap. How many times have you heard that for the same work, women receive 77 cents for every dollar a man earns? This charge is constantly repeated by feminist activists and their supporters. Yet it is so deeply misleading as to border on outright falsehood. 23-cent gender pay gap is simply the difference between the average earnings of all men and women working full-time. It does not take account for differences in occupations, positions, education, job tenure, or hours worked per week. Now, wage gap activists and groups like the American Association of University Women or the National Women's Law Center, they say, no, even when you control for these factors, women still earn less. Well, it always turns out that they have omitted one or two crucial data points. Take the case of doctors. On the surface, it looks like female physicians are clearly victims of wage discrimination. They appear to earn less for the same work. But dig a little deeper beneath the surface, and you find that women are far more likely than men to enter lower-paying specialties like pediatrics or family medicine than higher-paying cardiology or anesthesiology. They are also more likely to work part-time. And even women who work full-time put in about 7% fewer hours than men. Women physicians are also far more likely to take long leaves of absence, usually to start a family. Now, there are exceptions, but most workplace pay gaps narrow to the point of vanishing when one accounts for all of these relevant factors. Now, how do the women's advocacy groups react to this? They insist that women's choices are not truly free. Women who decide, say, to stay home with children or to work fewer hours or to become pediatricians rather than heart surgeons are held back by invisible barriers or internalized oppression. According to the National Organization for Women, powerful sexist stereotypes steer women and men toward different educational training and career paths and family roles. But is it really social conditioning that explains women's vocational preferences and their special attachment to children? Perhaps in the pursuit of happiness, men and women take somewhat different paths. And isn't it more than a little patronizing to suggest that most American women are not free, they're not self-determining human beings? And here is common sense proof that the male-female wage gap is untrue. If it were really true that an employer could get away with paying Jill less than Jack for the exact same work, wouldn't most employers fire as many of their male employees as possible and replace them with females and enjoy a huge market advantage? As a regular campus lecturer, I routinely encounter students who have fully accepted the feminist propaganda. American college women are arguably the most fortunate, liberated beings on the planet, yet in their feminist theory classes, they're likely to learn that they are put upon and tyrannized by men. And the more elite the school, the more advanced the degree, the more likely they are to take such feminist propaganda seriously. But this doesn't have to continue. The time has come for young women to take back feminism, reform it, correct its excesses, repudiate the victim propaganda, get rid of the women are from Venus, men are from hell storylines, and begin the arduous task of correcting almost 3 decades of feminist misinformation. And women who are plagued by workplace injustice or sexual violence will be best helped by truth and solid research, not by hysteria and hype. And as a final piece of personal advice for young women, appreciate and make good use of the unprecedented freedom that you have. I'm Christina Hoff Sommers of the American Enterprise Institute for Prager University.
She was right on, literally right out of the box. She was saying how free females are, how women's emancipation was the greatest thing, and not only are women doing great comparative to men, but better than men in majority of damn near everything, except for, the actual hard labor, construction and such. But when it comes to the educational type of environments like medicine and science and so on and so forth, women are matching and doing better. But yet she's telling how the feministic, gynocentric, misandrist propaganda, echo chamber, victim mentality, mind frame that is the nowadays, that's become so normalized, is misleading their data with women in violence, women in depression, and women in eating disorders, and women in the workplace inequality, type thing. Injustice, as they call it. All these things were so easily intellectually debunked that it just goes to show that only the incredibly young, aka naive, and the incredibly stupid, meaning anti-intellectual, anti-education, and even those who do get an education are socially stupid. You can have a master's degree and still be retarded, say socially, in regard to, street smarts or common sense things, such as what was said. If employers could make better, I guess you could say, gain for their business by paying women less, then they would fire all the men, because men are $15 and women are $12. So common sense would state that you would fire all the males so you can get that much more profit every week, every month, every year kind of thing. So it's just the most simple Occam's razor type things like that just kind of just show how ignorant and emotionally led these nowadays females are. Statistically it shows that women are more likely to go into lower paying jobs too. And so these things are never really talked about or included because it's an agenda, it's propaganda, it's brainwashing. They're taking advantage of the naive and the stupid, which make up a majority of the masses, unfortunately, because they're not willing to actually think on their own. They just want to take something, some ideology, and death grip it, rather than think on their own and research their own, and when I say research on their own, I'm saying objectively, not with bias, looking at only feminist news or feminist that or women's this, women's that, but no, actually taking consideration of both sides equally and then making a determination from there. Moreover, we have that colleges are very liberal, very democratic, very, lefty, as it said. So this shit gets pushed down their throats regardless, and so after a while you just kind of, you hear something enough, and then whether it's a lie, propaganda, or otherwise, you start to believe it. And that's what they do in college more than anything else with the feministic bullshit, and gynocentric bullshit, and misandry bullshit. But nonetheless, it takes a lot of work and a lot of discipline and a lot of intellectual honesty to actually think for yourself and come to your own conclusions. Yet in the hyper partisanship, there's you're either this or you're that. You're Republican or you're Democrat. You're liberal or you're this. You're Christian or you're atheist. Where I'm like, nope, I'm neither of those. I am Republican, Democrat, liberal, atheist, and Christian all in one. Because I take the good from each and every single one of those things and combine it to my own. I make it my own thing. I think for myself. I have my own ideologies, my own thought processes, my own everything, because I don't attach myself to an ideological thought or perspective or one style of thinking over the other. No, I take from all of them. And that is true to heart intellectual honesty. And that is how everybody should be doing it if they truly want to be honest, not only with themselves, but intellectually fair in general. You're not just blindly following what this person said, or this ideology, or that thought process, or this bias, or this political leaning, or this religion, or this anti-religion. No, you are truly authentic to yourself. It's easy to fall into the trap that is the nowadays with all this hyper extremism, this hyper ideologies, the hyper everything. It's just black or white, and if you're not that, you're gray, and that's kind of where I stand in. I'm kind of in that gray, at least comparative to a majority of the world. This is just another simple showing of exactly the toxic femininity, toxicity, cancerous thinking styles of the victim mentality that feminism brings. Now, of course, I'm going to be called all sorts of things, but of course the big one being the anti-feminist. Now, the part that I actually like of feminism, at least what it used to be, was that females got to do what males got to do, the equality thing. That I'm all for, because I actually am for equality. I don't mind that. That's cool. I support that type of shit. But I'm not for supporting superiority or falsehoods or extremism. Because a lot of nowadays feminists are about revenge, superiority, having favor, where men are down here, women are up here when it comes to advantages and so on and so forth. And it shows in society all the time. Ava Brighton and all sorts of other people like that will point this shit out all the time. The advantages in court, all the female-centric everything, really. They have their own shelters, places they can go, support groups, support this and that. You can get free things because you're a female, so on and so forth, but if you're male, you don't get any of that. And if you do, it's like one shelter compared to 5 female shelters, if not more. Women's resource shelter and all that kind of crap. Transport Her, which is only a cab service for females only. There are parking garages that are for females only. It's literally the KKK of the genders nowadays, where it's so segregated. You would think you're back in the racist days where blacks can only drink out of this fountain and whites can only drink out of that fountain. Nowadays, it's, instead of that, it's females can only, are the only ones allowed to have this parking area, or have this driving service, or have this shelter, and males cannot. Males are essentially the blacks, the African Americans of the back in the day, whereas females are the whites of back in the day. And that's really what it's come down to. They are literally the most racist, discriminatory, man-hating everything concerning men. And that's something they're not willing to admit to, though, you know, because they're just so perfect and they're so victims to everything in life. It's just like, yeah, it's just basic 101 common sense shit, like this video demonstrated, that destroys every single bullshit propaganda argument that has been said over and over and over for years and years and years now. And I love it. Get wrecked, feminists and females that are into that bullshit. Until next time.